Disclaimer: this is not a replacement for therapy or professional help. If you are struggling in any way, please consult a mental health professional. Seriously, this is just a podcast. Now enjoy. Hi, and today we are here with Corina Seligman, who is an associate marriage and family therapist. We're going to talk a little bit about her qualifications and her background and what brought her into being a therapist, as well as non-traditional families and her personal experience as a queer person in this world.
So let's talk a little bit about your title. You're an associate marriage and family therapist. What does that mean? And how did you get into it?
Okay, I'll start with how I got into it. So I am a singer and a songwriter, and I worked as a touring musician and just like a hustling musician in New York City for a very long time. And I bartended, of course, because
yes, you actually made my first drink.
Oh
yeah, that was a fun thing.
Yeah, so I did that for a really long time, and at a certain point in my sort of mid 30s, I decided I did not want to grow old bartending, and I really wanted to have kids at some point, and I needed to sort of figure out maybe like a more stable job or more stable income for that. And I love singing, and I will always be a singer, but I was getting really tired of just like the politics and the grind of the music business. And I felt like actually my creative life was sort of leading me in this direction of mental health, because I am an anorexia survivor. So I've been dealing with mental health stuff for a long time anyways, but I incorporated a lot of my journey into my lyrics. And as I was touring, I would just like have these really interesting conversations with folks. I think people felt like they could open up to me a lot because of the honesty in my lyrics or something. I don't know. And I found that I really liked having those conversations. And so I started doing these meditation and journaling workshops at like music conferences and stuff like that, and sort of with my artistic peers. And then when I started doing that soul searching and figuring out like what kind of a career shift I wanted to do, all I ever wanted to do was be a singer. And so I spent a long time just being like, what else makes me happy? What else do I care about? What else could I possibly be good at? And it was talking to folks about themselves and like sort of getting a peek behind the curtain of like people's real lives and real selves and helping them bring that out. And, my first thought was like, yeah, but I couldn't go to grad school. And then I'm like, yes, I could actually. So many years, a lot of money later, many life changes later, I ended up moving from New York back to California to go to grad school, to live with my dad and bartend so I could pay for grad school. And that's led me here. So the second question is my title, Associate Marriage and Family Therapist. So it is someone who has a graduate degree in therapy. So I got a master's degree in psychotherapy. And then after that, you have to get 3,000 hours of clinical experience, which is a lot. It takes a long time. And I had a baby in the middle of it, so that slowed me down a little. So I'm about 2/3 of the way of my hours, but I work the same way as a licensed marriage and family therapist would. The only difference is that I work under someone's license and I get weekly supervision, which I actually think is like better because I have someone that I can talk to about stuff and like check my biases with and get advice if I need it, but I also work very independently.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is so much work and learning and
so much work.
Seeking extra knowledge, which is always hard,
Yeah.
But let's shift a little bit to like your practice, which you focus a lot on LGBT and trans and queer adults and teens, and you say you love working, especially with the whole queer community. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and your experience personally?
Yeah. Yeah, my heart is really with the queer community, and that includes a lot of different kinds of folks. I myself am queer. I came out in my very early 20s. Both of my younger siblings are trans, so I come from a very queer family. And I think just like having all three of our different experiences, as a big sister, like watching my younger siblings come out as trans and like what that was like within my family, and that I thought I was actually pretty helpful to both my parents and my siblings. And I got really involved in, what is it called? Gender Spectrum, which is an organization for parents of trans youth. And I was like the sibling advocate. And I really dug it. And I think there's a lot of work to do there. And I think it's an experience that requires, I think, for queer and trans folks, even if they're not in therapy for that, it is very beneficial to have a therapist who aligns with them in that way anyway. So there's just like less explaining who you are and what your experience is. I also am super passionate about working with couples and couples that sort of reflect the kind of relationship I'm in, and a lot of the relationships that are underrepresented in everywhere, right? So that's interracial, queer, trans, non-monogamous, any kind of couple that we just don't have a lot of modeling for what kind of what a healthy relationship is, other than, you know, trying to be like a cishet married couple. And we have different values and we have different backgrounds, and we need support that's more aligned with who we are and what our values are. So I really enjoy doing that. And I also really like working with young folks and their parents. That's actually probably the hardest part of my job, is working with queer and trans youth and working with their parents. Because sometimes I get frustrated when the parents aren't on board right away, but also like they have their own process. And, you know, encouraging the young person to be a little more patient, because that's not a strength of young people anyways. So that's the challenging part of my job, but it's also really important. And I think there's probably not a lot of people who are skilled in that. So
yeah, it sounds like you have a lot of experience acting as that bridge and that kind of filter to go through and go, you know, let's have patience on both sides, but let's talk about these real issues. And this is as someone who gets it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think being aware of our biases, like that's something I literally went to school for. That's a big part of education as somebody in the mental health field. But I also think it's really important to talk about that within relationships, whether it's like a parent or a spouse or a partner. Is we're all, especially like in liberal Bay Area, we're all so afraid of saying the wrong thing and so afraid of like acknowledging any bias that we kind of bypass the opportunity to learn. So a part of what I say to parents sometimes is just like, hey, it's okay that you're not 100% on board with your kid being trans the day you find out.
Yeah.
You can tell me. We can talk about it. Yeah. Maybe not tell your kid all of your biases and concerns, but you do need to be able to talk about it, and that's important.
Absolutely. Yeah, okay, talking about those biases. And just to move to the last bit here is, you have this great quote from our last meeting that was, queerness is a sort of liberation. It's to create our own lives instead of fitting into a box. Could you expand on that a bit? It was such a good quote.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing I love about being queer and within the queer community. And it's a double-edged sword, right? Because it takes more creativity. It takes probably a lot more courage and a lot more expansive thinking, because we don't have a way that we're told to live, you know? And I think that's probably changing as time goes on. Like, my partner and I are a queer trans couple raising a child, and so he'll see that in a different way than I saw it growing up. But because we don't have a rule book, we just do what we want. And not that that's always possible for everyone, depending on, what communities you're in, but I'm hoping that's changing. And we have a lot of self-limiting beliefs based on what we've seen and what we've been shown and what we've been told. And a part of how I work with clients is just to continue challenging that. And that's what I've continued to try to do with myself and within my family, is just like, if you feel like something's not possible for yourself, just to really challenge that. Is it really not possible? Or have you just never seen it before? Or has somebody told you it's not possible? And who are you really? And what do you really want? And how do you know that? Is that based on what somebody's told you about who you are? Or is that based on your true self and your true desires? And that takes a lot of time and a lot of work, and it takes a lot of feeling safe and having permission.
Yeah, absolutely. This is helpful for me sitting here. I feel like I need to go have a talk with my partner.
Good.
This is great. And then I think we have a little list of questions for our listeners, if you would like me to grab that. Or
Sure. So I have some questions that I've just sort of thought of that might be, I don't know, thought-provoking or helpful, or sort of like journaling prompts to get our conversation going that we're going to continue to have on this podcast. So in what ways do you feel different than the way you're perceived by anyone, right? By the people closest to you, by somebody walking down the street, etc. In what environments do you feel most seen as your authentic self? Do you feel a sense of belonging in any community? Why or why not? Who has created your identity? Who has told you who you are? So this is not to make you feel bad if you don't know how to answer any of these questions. This is sort of the basis of our ongoing conversation that we're going to be having here.
absolutely. Amazing. And just to add to that, we're gonna have an email linked, and they can send direct comments or questions under the post for questions we will be reviewing in further podcasts. So if you have a question that you would like to talk to a professional about, disclaimer, this is not professional advice, and you should seek help if you are struggling.
Yeah.
But if you would like to hear an interesting answer to your question on the next podcast, please use the email linked below, or just send us a direct message on the post on Instagram, and we'll sort through and give you some answers next time.